Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining XROM Podcast. I'm your host, Eddie Avil. XROM Podcast is designed to celebrate, showcase, and shape the AR, VR, MR industry and to help you understand and learn about this transformational technology which holds potential to change the way we live, work, and play. XROM Digital News Magazine and XROM Podcast is a labor of love. We need your support to keep this platform running, so do kindly subscribe and spread the word. And do also suggest ways for us to improve and who you might want me to interview next. Happy to have with me Eloi Gerard, founder of Shanghai-based virtual reality content studio Crow's Nest and XR Story, a community of XR professionals from China and around the globe, working on shaping the XR industry forward. Eloi is a leading voice in China's XR industry, and it was a wonderful conversation where he shone light on the hype and reality of China's AR, VR, MR industry. Wish you enjoyed this conversation. Hi, Eloi. So thank you for being on XRM Podcast. It's really a pleasure to have you on XRM Podcast. So you've been a consultant, and you've come to China, say maybe like around 10, 15 years back. Like that's what the last we spoke. That's what you mentioned. You also have your own startup called Crow's Nest, and then you have a community platform called XR Story. And you've been push driving the AR/VR ecosystem there in China. So can you start by telling me something about Crow's Nest? How did you build it, and what's the status at this point in time?
Of course, yeah. So my background is mainly from the time I'm in China for 8 years. I worked in content and building TV content or audiovisual content for marketing, for agencies, and for events, And on that experience, I decided to create my own company called Crow's Nest 4 years ago, and it's dedicated to VR and AR, and just transposing our ability to do content, video content, into VR. So we started by doing a lot of 360-degree video. Our first client was Peugeot Citroën, and then we moved to a lot of travel clients like Thomas Cook, Club Med, we have Hyatt. Well, we're moving into different international brands being here in China.
So these are live action, or these are CG VR content?
So we did both. We did at the beginning, of course, it was very it was 4 years ago where there was not even a camera. We started by building our own camera with GoPros, like the whole community worldwide. This is what we were doing, and so stitching these images. So we were not yet even thinking about using CG, even if we had the capabilities to do it. And then progressively, I think it was for a client called Cash, which is a retail brand here, a fashion retail brand in China from France, where we started building the first CG, which was quite rudimentary, really new, because it was computer intensive to do that in 360 degrees. So yes, at the beginning it was a bit hard, but now we are building full CG things. It really it depends. So we can do everything that has been done in a video. We do it in VR. We also do animation. So Rob, my partner, is an animator. He's from the UK, but originally he's an animator. So we can also provide for clients, quite delicate clients who are looking for a more artistic experience. Then we can provide animation and delicate animation. Yes.
Right. So you're a Belgian, right?
Yes, true. Yes.
So why China? I mean, it sounds, because you have a background in media, technology, and advertising. So China obviously seems to be the obvious answer, because that part of the world is booming when it comes to media, technology, and advertising. But what is the ground truth? I mean, at this point in time, there's two markets which is being called the market. When it comes to AR, VR worldwide, one is America, and obviously the second is China. But what is the ground truth in China when it comes to AR, VR, MR?
Yes. So I believe that China would be the largest market for AR, VR for multiple reasons. The first one being I was in China already for several years, and I was like, in China, people, they really love technology. They really love to try new things. They're not afraid, like for me as European, in Belgium, but I guess the same a bit all around Europe. We are very afraid of trying new things. We are like, let's wait that, for a few years, these things has been the Americans, they do it and then they try and they make mistakes. And then when it's working really well, after a few years, maybe we will think about implementing these kind of things. This is what Europe is about. But in China, it's like, no, if it's something new, if it looks cool, we go directly and we really try to do something with that. So I was really expecting that VR would be a wide thing and that China would be a massive market. You have a massive market for video games. So I imagine that the gamer community of China would really enjoy a lot of VR and games in VR. And it was unfortunately not the case at all. So my mistake. So China didn't really embrace the whole VR thing, even if China is the factory of the world, where so a lot of hardwares are actually built in China. So Oculus, many parts of the Oculus, I think that even the final parts is assembled in China. HTC is Taiwanese, so and then many components, many processors and many graphic cards and whatever. All of these type of things is actually produced in China. So China has a major contribution, at least in producing the necessary piece of that. But it didn't work in the adoption itself. So it's not here that people really got in love with the idea of watching something in VR, playing video games, or having a narrative experience, or even for B2B application. This market is only starting slowly right now. And it didn't work for multiple reasons. The first one being that we have a huge firewall, so around China. We are experiencing a quite heavy censorship here, and Facebook is blocked, Google is blocked, and Oculus belongs to Facebook. So Oculus and accessing Oculus.com and accessing all the content that you want to use with Oculus doesn't work in China without what we call a VPN, which is like a little software that you install on your computer. You have to pay a subscription for that, and it adds some friction even to VR, which is like already quite difficult to have. So to be able to really access like cool content like what we would have on the Oculus store, it's difficult. It's already difficult. Then we have another problem, which is like the level of education in universities. We don't have enough good schools for film schools, for example, but then we do not have enough creative schools, design schools, to be able to really invent what will be the interaction of the future and what VR can be used for, So there are a lack of multiple talents here. It's very hard to recruit people that have an understanding and that can bring new ideas into VR. I like to say that to be a great entrepreneur in VR or to be a great employee, let's say you need to be good in 3 domains. You need to be good in creativity, you need to be good in technology, and you need to be good in business. All of these 3 things needs to be important in the same time, And in China, we are good in developing people into one area of the things, but never into really the 3 things, and having a complete understanding of these 3 things to do something, to do a great application, a great game, or build an ecosystem. So all this idea of an ecosystem that Oculus is building, that Sony is building, here there is a huge lack of that. We don't understand how to build an ecosystem of content creators, platforms, and hardwares. All of these things doesn't really exist. And then we have a funny part also is that China, of course, there is a heavy censorship, and there is censorship on the porn industry. And the porn industry in the US is a great driver to the VR business. So here also we do not have these people that could be being between guys and being, oh, let's try this VR thing, ha ha ha, the porn, this is so fun, and they start by having a little porn and then they move into games or other applications. This doesn't really exist here. So we have a lack of different things that doesn't make the market being really thriving, and being very healthy. But I do not lose all my hopes. I see that progressively the building blocks are arriving, and that the market is building slowly and in a more mature way, and with more new ideas are coming. But it's way slower than I imagine, way slower than in the US or in Europe.
Wow. So you know what the outside perspective of China is that's the part of the world which is booming because at least the media projects as China being completely invested and push driving the ecosystem when it comes to artificial intelligence, AR, VR, MR, or quantum computing and things like that. And to get a perspective that it's still slow, it's something which is. It's difficult to fathom because I mean the perspective over here is that China is leading the space. So in India obviously has the similar kind of problems, though the AR VR ecosystem is growing quite rapidly, and I think what our plus point is there's no censorship. Being a democratic country kind of helps us to do what we want. The porn industry is there flourishing. Nobody stops it. The government obviously has a little say on maybe you cannot push drive maybe child pornography and things like that. But then there is you have freedom to do what you want. But I think what makes China different is that they are working very hard to delete the copycat tag which has been put on them, and I guess that's the reason they are fearless, and that's the reason somehow I mean I feel that they are leading in all of these technologies. And like you rightfully mentioned, even if you want to over here in India, back in India, if you want to build an AR headset or VR headset, we'll have to run to China to acquire the products. And maybe yes, there is a lack of, like you mentioned, that a complete balance of what one needs to be an entrepreneur, like a sense of creativity with the technology and the business. You know, that possibly is maybe could be missing, and maybe that's maybe slowing down the thing. But I really hope that China push drives the ecosystem because it's a huge country and they're doing all the right things. So you've been push driving the community over there with XR Story. Can you give me more details on that? It's built on WeChat platform, right?
Yes, yes. So in China we have we have WeChat because we don't have Facebook and we don't have WhatsApp. All of these Western applications are blocked here. So Tencent created their own messaging app called WeChat, which is immensely popular here in China. Absolutely everyone is using that, and you use that to transfer money. It's like your daily tool. That you use it for business. The email barely exists anymore. We do almost everything through WeChat and through messaging through WeChat. And very, at the beginning of my company 3 years ago, I was frustrated that the ecosystem, I think it's a bit the case like what you are doing in India, I was frustrated that we couldn't gather together, and people were doing great things in Beijing, people were doing great things in Hangzhou, in Shenzhen, and then outside of China. And I was realizing that these people were not really connecting. And that China needed to be connected quite to the rest of the world. So I was like, okay, let's create a little WeChat group which works like a WhatsApp group, and start adding few people that I think would be interesting and would really bring some information and try to share more information, create collaboration, and that clients could find vendors and that it would help and build a bit more the ecosystem. So I created XR Story in this way, and then every day I share a few news on my group, and people add friends and add other people, and this community is like growing, and we are like almost like 400 people I think in the group now. And you have people from HTC, from Google, from Oculus, and from Xiaomi, from all the vendors, and from studios, from different places where we share ideas. And try to anticipate what's happening, and just it's a little workshop. It's a little area of freedom for us where we can share great ideas. Unfortunately, I tried to invite you multiple times, but in India it's blocked for some reason, and Tencent, and we don't know why. Please, Tencent, hear us and try to help our Indian friend to join WeChat. It would be amazing. So yeah, it's nothing, It's just a group, and then I just organized a drink, or I did like a conference on Altspace VR for the community. I did it 2 times. I think about doing it a bit more, but it's just like, how can we gather the community? You have festivals, you have online communities, and it's just one of them where we share and where we try to be also quite fun about the industry and make fun of ourselves. Yes, so
yeah, so I think you're doing a great thing, because I guess the only way the AR/VR ecosystem can grow is when you build a community and you nurture it, nudge it, because the technology is in nascent stage and it's a transformational technology, and eventually once it matures, I guess it's going to impact and disrupt all possible industry verticals and. Yeah, so it's a very potential technology. So tell me, what is the current ecosystem or for startups in China? I mean, what's the funding stage? Because worldwide, globally, if you see, uh, there are good things and bad things are happening in equal. There was Dakri, a very successful startup, which just shut down. Magic Leap has given out its patent as a collateral to JP Morgan Chase. There's some really good startups which has been shutting down. But at the same time, there are some really great things happening, right? Oculus Quest is doing very, very well. The sales are very encouraging. And there are AR/VR startups which is growing globally on a phenomenal rate. Over here in India, only we have more than around 150 startups. So, what is the ecosystem like for startups in China? And how is I last got read this news that the government has like a 2025, 2030 plan for attaining global this thing with their AR/VR community, the Chinese government. So, what is the present situation in China with the AR/VR startups?
Okay, so before talking about the present situation, let's talk about the past situation that leads to the present one with some problem. Okay, when VR really started worldwide, it was like 4 years ago. When the Samsung Gear VR and the first Oculus Rift was released. Everything in China was like, VR will be the most important technology in the next 100 years. It's gonna be something so big that our president and Xi Jinping and everyone and the prime minister and everyone was, China has to lead into that field. Okay, and everyone, I guess, China is about startups and it's about success stories like Jack Ma, And when we heard that Palmer Luckey sold his company, so Oculus, to Facebook for 2 to 3 billions, then all investors in China was, $3 billion. I need to be into that thing. I need to. So everybody was like, wow. We move into that. The government being the first one to actually move into that thing, and the government created several funds, regional funds, in different provinces of China, start distributing a huge amount of money into any startup that could have, that just say the word VR. Hello, I do VR. Please give me 10 million RMB. And this money was distributed like so easily to so many people. Of course, out of these many people, many of those were totally unqualified and had absolutely no idea of what is spatial computing, and how, what does it mean to do a VR application? What does it mean to organize information into the space? There was, that a huge lack of understanding what it is. It was just, everyone was just driven by these $3 billion that Palmer Luckey was doing. So, and the government just enforced this idea by spreading all their billions into unqualified people. What happened is that it was a huge war there to try to get this money, and at the end it didn't lead to anything. Of course, after 1 year, 2 years, the vast majority, 99%, I've heard, there is some report saying that, of the 99% of the startups in China just collapsed, bankrupt, everything is gone. Sorry, government, we lost all your money. Sorry, taxpayer. Yeah, so everything is gone. It created for 1 and 2 years a pure distortion in competition also, because You had unqualified people with a huge amount of money that they were advertising, of course, and they were attracting clients, and these clients were looking at their solutions and looking at it and being like, what is that? It doesn't mean anything. They understood that it's. And then aside of that, you had real little startup with real good ideas, but without the money of the governments that couldn't compete with the money, with the startups having connection with the government, and that collapsed also because they were not connected to the government. So the whole ecosystem was burned because of that wrong policy, So it took a few years after to that the entire thing. Okay, it's a huge failure from mainly for from in terms of policy. A huge failure. Then it took a few years for the government to stop and to say, okay, we're not gonna touch into that thing anymore. We imagine that this is what they're gonna do after for AI and for blockchain, and this is they copy paste this strategy, which is probably very wrong, but whatever. And now the ecosystem is more. The government is not involved into that thing, so you have real startup with real VCs. They are really thinking about, okay, what it is, what is this hardware? What does it? What can we do? Where is the traction? Which company does really have clients here? Where are the revenue coming from? So it has been, I would say, now 2 years that it's more logical, more where if you have a good idea, you can actually come. If you do VR for architecture or for construction, yes, there is a need for that. Please come and do that. Before you would be eaten by another company that actually don't understand what is VR for construction, but that would take the whole space and the whole PR. But now it's a good moment to actually do that. But it's still very small. So if you are talking about what is the ecosystem of the startups in China, it's still super small. We are just few people. There are few investors that are actually understanding really what is VR now, because before they were also investing like crazy money on very unqualified startup, and now they are thinking more. And I guess that it's the same in the US. You have specialized VCs in VR and in AR, and those are the ones you want to talk to. You don't want to talk to generalist VC who they invest in blockchain, they invest in e-commerce, and they invest in VR, but they don't actually understand what is the ecosystem and what is the VR ecosystem. So it's slowly coming now. We still, of course, still driven by a lot by hardware, because we have major hardware company. We have HTC, we have Xiaomi, we have Pico. I don't know if Pico is successful for you. We have here in Shanghai, we have we have Pimax, so we have different of these companies, and they have their own little success in their own niche, and it start being like stable, So it starts. We have in Beijing, we have Veer, which is a platform of 360-degree video. They are pivoting again. They are searching a bit where is the traction, and I think now they are really focusing on premium content, and they want to show premium content in VR to the end users, where before it was more user-generated content. But so people are still looking for their own little niche and their own little market, but it's more healthy. It's more business driven now, and more stable, and the outlook looks better than before.
Right. Yeah. Somehow, we were. In India, we didn't go through that hype cycle, because I guess that's terrible for VCs who put in their money, and then they realize, oh wow. When you said 99% of startups went bankrupt, after the hype, I guess that's what brings a bad name. Somehow we in India there was no such hype. Yes, post Facebook acquiring Oculus, there was this huge media and PR outburst that Mark Zuckerberg goes and acquires Oculus, and VR is going to be the next big thing. But then luckily there was no investors over here who was jumping onto the bandwagon, investing into startups. Even now, like I mentioned, we have around 150 plus startups, but less than 5% has got some kind of funding. And yes, I am doing something to push driving the ecosystem, connecting to the government or the investors, and building a community, and identifying those startups which are scalable and which are driven, and they have the sustainability built uh, into their workplace. So tell me, I mean, I feel that India and China are two very strong nations which can play a big role when it comes to global adoption of AR VR, because collectively we are somewhere around half of the world's population. I think collectively we have somewhere around 3 billion plus of people just in India and China, and that's a huge number of people. And supposing, and if someday we kind of push drive adoption each of our countries, that will kind of add be like one of those, maybe what's that, when something happens around in some part of the world, then acts as a, I'm not getting the right word, but possibly it'll push drive the ecosystem and pushing drive the mainstream adoption for globally. What do you think what should be done? I personally believe that collaboration is a key to grow this ecosystem, but somehow there is not a single bridge between India and China to enable collaboration between startups, to grow the ecosystem. So, do you see that as a possibility? And would, according to you, something like that help grow the ecosystem?
So, of course, I totally agree with you. There is huge opportunities in collaborating between these two countries, for sure. It's a wide, super big market. And it's true that the collaboration is almost non-existent. Not only in AR VR. When I see in technology, I do not see lots of sharings between India and China. I actually don't know why. Well, what I see is that from China, everybody is very focused on the US. The main partner for Chinese is to sell in the US, not even Europe. It's really US, because US is it's a big market where people are rich and where you can actually sell at a high price. So they are super focused on the US market, I guess, for this reason. But there is no reason to not increase the collaboration. We are extremely close, so it's very simple to do that. But China is also focusing on the satellite around China, like Taiwan, like Singapore. Southeast Asia is usually a place where there are also a lot of collaboration, more than India. I guess India is big, and India is so I don't think that Chinese imagine that India could be a great market for them, except that I think that brands like Xiaomi are working very well, and Oppo and Vivo, I think it's working very well in India. So there are some already existing brands that are doing that, but I don't know if in AR VR there is something existing like that, where it could be. I guess there is also a huge community of gamers in India, where there could be some stuff going on. I mean, I'm super happy to help in building any bridge between both of even if I'm in Belgium.
Yeah, completely. That could be like a nice opportunity, because down here with my ventures, I've been doing the thing because I believe the collaboration is the future. And with Immersion VR Fest, which was India's first VR film festival and conference, we had somewhere around 600 odd people coming for the event. And what I did was I reached out to different countries, at least the embassies of the countries, right from UK, Australia, Israel, New Zealand, and even China. And luckily, we had the team from UK DIT participating for the first year, and this second year we still in talks with Canada and Australia and New Zealand, and hopefully and Israel, and hopefully China. I mean, though, I mean, it's very initial conversation. I hope that there can be some kind of bridge built, because yes, I mean, India at this point in time, the industry is in a very nascent stage, but it's growing rapidly, and I do see. You rightfully mentioned that the price points over here in India compared to America there's a huge vast difference, because the price points over there is, I mean, people will pay a bigger price compared to India, but the scale market size is humongous over here. So tell me, which vertical, according to you, is going to kick drive the adoption conversation for VR?
I think the game industry. I think the gamers, we have to. I'm not a gamer myself. I do AR VR for marketing, but it is of course very important for me that there are as much people in VR and having a VR headset where we can propose content to them. So for the mass market, I imagine that. Oculus Quest, especially now that that you can use Oculus with the link, so which will open a new library of content and people will be able to access a lot of very good content. I think this really helps to increase the user base. In China, it's a problem because the Oculus Quest is prohibited because it's Facebook, so it doesn't connect. It's not prohibited; you can buy it, but to connect, you need to install a VPN, so it's not simple. But it becomes the most important offer now. For a consumer, it would be like you would be crazy to not buy this because you can do anything you want with an Oculus Quest, and this device has problem in China. But I think more and more people are anyway going through that and playing with more games, and the more studios are building games and AAA games for VR, the best it will be. And I see also a great traction with kids. I don't know if it's the same for you in India, but here in China, the youngest, like teenagers, when they start doing things in VR, they super love it. Super love the idea of being in this different world, and it's working really a lot. So I think it's also a question of generation, of like a growing generation Z as we call it, growing and playing more games or having more narrative experience. And then having more in education, I think it will continuously drive also that we build content for education and for schools, or all these type of things, will help. Yeah, I think so.
What are your views on location-based entertainment? Because that's one vertical which is growing in a big way. Void has invested in it, and Steven Spielberg's company Dreamscape Immersive has been invested in it. Hologate is doing very well. Zero Latency from Australia has been doing very good. So what are your views on LBs?
So here in China, we had at the beginning of VR, LBE was like, LBE will be the most important thing. And I was surprised because I was like, I'm not sure about that, because how can you really differentiate yourself, especially at the beginning, at this stage, how can you really differentiate yourself from LBE to a home entertainment experience, And there was not that much compelling games to be really like, LBE makes a difference. But so you had a huge development of anybody in China you have in Shanghai, like, I don't know, hundreds of people using their apartments to put an HTC Vive, and then an online going on a little platform and saying, I have 3 games, and if you come to my apartment, you just pay 20 RMB and you can play for 15 minutes of these games. I visited some of them to understand these new trends. So of course it was like an opportunity to make money for a few of them. You just buy an HTC Vive and you just do that, and of course it's illegal because you do not have the proper license to have a commercial activity. But China is not about that. Okay, if you see an opportunity like that, you just do it. And but there was no big strategy. Everybody was copying itself, and there was no differentiator in the experience. So it at the end was quite expensive for something that was not bringing much value. So the users, they were trying the Vive, and in an apartment they were paying a little bit of money to play, and then they were probably coming back home and check online and buying themselves an HTC Vive. And LBE had no sense, because it couldn't have like traction and a recurrent user coming back, because LBE was just there to sell the concept of VR, and they were, and each time that you convinced a user about VR, he was buying his own headset, and he couldn't come back to your LBE. So it didn't really work. And but you had that, in malls. But the vast majority of those experiences was super crap. It was like you could see content which was just downloaded from YouTube. So people were downloading advertising in VR being made out of YouTube, or like roller coaster, but super crap roller coaster. They were like, it doesn't matter, And of course, the users, they were in the mall. They were, oh, what is VR? I want to try. They were trying once. And then it's super crap, this thing. Yes, it is super crap. And it didn't help us to convince them about what is VR, because they were trying in this context. And China doesn't really think about content, it's really hardware driven. So they were thinking that if the shop and the LBE was cool with big machines where you were using VR, what you were seeing doesn't matter. But of course it matters. It's the most important thing. But they didn't get it, at this stage. So there was a huge trend of LBE, and then the whole thing collapsed because people were not interested anymore in LBE. Those who were interested in VR, they start buying their own VR headset and going at home. But now, I think it's the moment for probably the Americans and people like Sandbox VR, which is actually Hong Kong based. But the Void, and all these super high-end, or Dreamscape, as you said, all these super high-end company to come to China because they could come and there is nothing anymore. They would bring an exclusive experience with an exclusive content. And there is an existing market now. People understand what it is, and they would bring an experience which is way higher than what they've seen before. So I'm quite sure that it would make sense now for a very good concept to come to China and to bring that, like the Void, yeah. And they could go into so many cities in China to do it. They couldn't be copied anymore, because it's quite unique. It's like the content being made for the Void is only for the Void, so it doesn't. It would be quite protected. Piracy wouldn't really exist for them. So I think it's a good moment for them to come and to do this type of thing. There is not any more great things. There are ideas, there are projects. I think that some people are raising money to do things, but it's the good moment to investigate this market with a unique value proposition, with unique ideas and things that cannot be copied, and bring an experience which is super high end. It would work very well, I think.
Right, completely. I do agree because just like you mentioned, bad content is something which has really been the main reason for killing the AR, VR. Because most of the people, except for the ones who've invested in the space, like us, who've been, doing this stuff. It's just us who know about what this technology is or what it can do. But you just step outside your house, and largely, people really don't know what this technology is or what it can do. They've just read about it possibly in the media or seen it in papers or watched it on TV. Now, if the ones who are possibly experiencing something like this and for the first time, and if they experience bad content, that's such a letdown, and that just kills it. So exclusivity, I think, is something which should be retained with AR VR, because it should be identified as being exclusive, something which is different, what 2D cannot do. So that's the only way I think possibly you will push drive the ecosystem, because AR VR MR is an extension. It's not what 2D is. With AR VR you can move from your 2D platform and jump into the 3D platform and start interacting with content. And that's what the power of AR VR MR is. So going back to your WeChat thing, you mentioned that yes, you have around 400 people who on your group and your community, and yes, I think in some ways, if Tencent kind of comes in and opens it up to not just India but around the people, around the world, I think the community will grow, and that's what I think is the need of the day. So what do you think, with you are push driving the ecosystem, what extra step one needs to take to push drive the ecosystem, and what to build what does a startup needs to do to make his company more sustainable and scalable?
I think that we are still at the beginning of this entire thing. I think we are still building the language of spatial computing. Okay, so we are the writers of this language. You, me, all the community, and we try to experience things. People are doing super hot. People are doing Beat Saber. People are doing narrative experience, like Felix and Paul. And we are all trying to do something, and then we put it on actually within our community, because who is watching these things first is us. We're going into festival, buying these things online, trying this new thing. Oh, let's try. I've heard that this is interesting. This is and then we comment, and then we are like, okay, yes, this is working. A camera movement in VR, it doesn't work very well. We didn't know at the beginning. We were like, we want to try, because we just want to transpose what television is about and put it in VR. And then we just move the camera, and then we try. We are sick, and then what does it mean? It's bizarre. It doesn't work, And then we start, thinking and questioning ourselves. And then what does it? Actually, the camera has to stay there. Camera can stay there, and it's the thing around that have to move. Yes, this is okay. Yeah, and we think about it, and we're like, yes, and we try several times, and then we show it to people, and they are looking at it, and they say, and they are reproducing themselves, the movement of the camera by moving their head around the scene, and then we're okay, we discover something, and this is building the language of VR, So and we are at a very small step on all these things. I'm just talking about camera movement, but it's like, how do we use interaction? We are so much lost into that thing, Now we're gonna have hand tracking that I hope will be mainstream within the community fast. But how do we use that? We never had the chance to do that, to have a computer using our hands. So how are we going to push on button, or does it mean that we get close to something and then this action starts? We don't know. So it's going to bring a new things, and we're going to have to experience. And many people, will do experience, and they will be like, actually we build it this way. But then we realize the user never think about clicking on the button. He look at the button, but he doesn't think about clicking on it. So no button. Let's do something different, or let's do a button in a different way, or, and we will have to think about all these new type of interaction that we don't know. And we're going to do, and it's our burden. Okay, we choose to do that job. We have to go through that. Research and development is part of what we need to do. So I think we're gonna still be a few months, maybe a few years of really developing this entire thing. Deciding that this button goes to that thing. Just right now between Oculus and Vive, and the buttons are not the same. Even within the Oculus store, it's not the same button to teleport yourself. It's like, because everybody was researching in different ways. So you're like, no, we need to establish a common grammar. We are writing things. People are watching our things. It's like between writers and readers, how we need to be compatible and build this language and be. This is obvious that when you have hand tracking and the button is there for everyone, it means that clicking there. We will need to reinvent that type of things and really establish what it means. So I think that when that will be there and obvious for everyone and for every developer and for the audience, then we can start building really cool application where it's gonna be obvious. So it doesn't mean that it's not the right time for startup to come. I think it is the right time, because it's gonna still take maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years. But if you want to build a great platform, a great product, it's probably now that you need to experience and learn. The learning in AR, VR takes years, okay? Years of understanding and realizing that you were wrong and that you're, I thought about that, but then, sorry people, actually, how many times it happened to me, and I had to say sorry to my partner. Say, sorry, Rob. Yes, I thought that for years that this would be, and you disagree with me, but actually now I have to admit I was wrong. So it's about really thinking through several times, looking at the user doing this error many times, and then thinking, okay, no, yeah, it shouldn't be this way. And okay, we are still building the whole thing. We are still we're still making mistakes and trying to build that. So I think it's the perfect time, for startups to really come into our field, because now we see the adoption coming. It's really close to now, but without big expectations. It's really coming with a simple idea, precise ideas, and being like, oh, okay, let's imagine to do something which is can be profitable in the existing market, and don't think that billions of people will have a VR headset in 2 years. No, it's not the case. It's gonna still be close. It's gonna be still small within the next few years, and you have to think about proposing a product which is compelling for a very niche audience, and think about really making something great for this very niche audience, I think.
Lovely. Yeah, I think, bang on. I think whatever you said was completely bang on. We are in the early days, and I think everybody is learning globally. It's only when you make mistakes, you learn. It's fail forward. You move one step ahead. And I guess we rightfully said. Startups need to start small. Do have your big dreams. But take one step at a time. I guess go solve one problem, get a use case which is at this point in time solving a problem and helping people, and I guess that's the only way to go move about and building the ecosystem and growing the ecosystem and making AR VR that thing which will impact us in a way and transform mankind. Yeah, so in that note, thank you, Eloi. It was a pleasure talking to you. So would you like to share any last words of advice to our listeners, startups or people who are listening on to you? And besides the advice, what do you see, or where do you see yourself in the next 10 years?
In the next 10 years. In 10 years, we have no idea what will be there in 10 years. 10 years. If you asked me that 3 years ago, I would be like, yeah, I think it's going to be very far. No, now we're going to be way more cautious about that. No, I think I love what I do. I love to do XR for marketing, and doing experience for brands, and think about applications which are very customer facing, and useful for people, and that they understand what they can do with that type of things. I'm super in love with original content. So to do not games, but what I would call narrative experience, the things that you will find in festivals, in Venice, in Tribeca, in Sundance, and here in China, we have a festival called the Sandbox Immersive Festival, which is also providing amazing things. And I'm in love with that things, because artists are building experience, narrative experience for the sake of it. It's pure research in VR, where when you are watching that, we are rethinking how to deliver a story. Okay, and what does it mean to have an immersive story? What does it mean immersion? What does it mean interaction with a story? And all this thinking, I think this is really the research and development laboratory of the entire industry. Is really in the field of narrative VR. So I'm in love with that, and I hope that in the next 10 years we will do more of these works, and to go into festival, and to go into, you have cinema VR, you have people downloading secretly in their Oculus home and on Steam bizarre things, and being like, this is interesting. I love this type of things also. It doesn't bring money, but it helps the industry to move forward. So I would love to do more of that, and to do more in different countries. I'm based in China, but we would love to see what's going on in India. We would love to go in the US, in Europe, and to have more things. As a final thing, because you are final words, I would love to invite you, of course, or to any startups in XR in India. If you guys come through Shanghai, please, you contact me. I hope you can share my contact. I really want to know what you guys are doing there, and to come with your demo, and show me if you need any introduction with the startups, or with investors, or with hardware people here in China. I would be very happy to help.
Lovely. So thank you, Eloi, for being on XRM podcast. Really appreciate it. It was a lovely conversation. I got to know so much about where the China industry stands. What are you doing? And thank you for the last message. And I'm sure the listeners and startups who are keen on exploring China as a market would love to get in touch with you. And yes, I will leave your information behind, your all your social media links behind. So in case if there's a startup who wants to connect with you, and if they have a travel plan to China, Shanghai, I'm sure they will get it, reach out to you, because that's the only way we can build the ecosystem and grow the ecosystem. So thank you once again for joining XRO podcast. And for the listeners, if you like what you see in here, please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye bye.